Laura, you can start playing. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. As mentioned, my name is Laura Pasqualino, and I hold a master's degree in social work. I've been practicing for over 25. So before we begin this evening, let's take a closer look first at what will be addressed tonight in the presentation. So we'll begin by talking first about what makes your support network, your friends, your family, your colleagues, your acquaintances so important as you navigate these really difficult, confusing, overwhelming waters of your child's diagnosis, their treatment, and beyond. We'll then take a look at the challenges that you may be experiencing in these relationships and try to take a bit of a look at what gets in the way of people being helpful in the ways that you need them to be. And then the focus of the presentation will shift to examine how to strengthen your support network and really help you communicate your needs, your wants, and your wishes to the people around you who care and who, for the most part, really just want to show that they care and to be there by your side. So we've all likely heard some form of the saying that it takes a village. The idea has been that it takes a village to raise a child. If this is true at the best of times, it's certainly true during the crisis of learning that your child has cancer. Many parents reflect that they had already been finding life to be challenging prior to the cancer diagnosis, between work and school and leisure activities and your kids' sports, managing your home. But with a child's cancer diagnosis, your family then is suddenly thrust into a whole new level of activity that's well above and beyond the usual business of day-to-day life. If you're a two-parent family, many couples try this divide and conquer approach. So one parent sort of holding down the fort at home and working, trying to keep things afloat at home, and the other parent managing the activities and needs of their ill child. And this feels like this 24-hour a day, 7 days a week, no time off kind of feel for families. If you're a single parent, although you may have been well adjusted to managing parenting on your own before the cancer diagnosis, you're still doing all the same things that families with two parents would be trying to do, but doing it and managing it without a live-in partner, which is incredibly challenging. So with all the added tasks and responsibilities, the support from your community of friends and family is especially important. Support shows up in a variety of ways. So practical support like meals or rides, emotional support when you lean on somebody when you're struggling. Perhaps it's something where you lean on friends to take your mind off what you're dealing with and have some distraction. So all of these are so important and they can help to ease the burden of the struggle. As you begin dealing with your child's cancer, people show up in a variety of ways to show their support. It can be helpful for a sec just to take a step back and figure out who they are and how they fit into your life. I think it goes without saying that your oncology team and supporting professionals are very important to your experience, but what about friends and extended families and colleagues and acquaintances? So I want you for a moment just to imagine yourself and your child with cancer sitting inside of a circle, and then imagine bigger circles outside of that small circle. So think about your friends and extended family, colleagues, acquaintances. How close would they be to that inner circle? And the idea is the closer they are, the more intimate the connections. So for everybody, this is going to look a little bit different. So for some attending tonight, your own parent might be extremely close to this inner circle. So perhaps they live with you, or they help in day-to-day activities or meals, and they're a source of comfort for you, a place where you can kind of lean on when you're feeling overwhelmed. While for another parent on the call, it might be their best friend that might be much more intimately connected than a grandparent. For one parent, their work colleagues might best be described as an acquaintance, while for another person, their colleagues are very close, almost like a second family. So, regardless of who they are and where they fit, it's clear that we need help to manage. So, families frequently state that their cancer experience has brought some surprises, with some people stepping closer and other people moving further away. I often hear things like, my best friend was someone that I expected to be there for me, but never seemed to check in or connect with me in a meaningful way, and that when we did connect, it felt strained. Or on the other hand, sometimes I hear that someone that a parent really barely knew from their child's school became really important to them because whenever that person from school reached out, they just seemed to say or do the right things, and they ended up leaning on them more than they would have ever expected. So, as I said, there's this surprise of who steps up and who steps back. So I think we can all agree that most of the time people are reaching out and doing and saying things to show you that they care and that they support you. So with friends and family so important in helping things feel more manageable, why is it then that sometimes our interactions with them or the things that they say or do just seem to miss the mark? Instead of making you feel more supported, you might feel more alone or more misunderstood or even frustrated or angry with them. Perhaps it might be like a close friend who calls often to check in on you, but you walk away from the phone call somehow feeling more alone, less supported than you did before the phone call even started. Or it might be a relative who reaches out and says things that make you feel angry and frustrated. So I wonder, let's take a look at why this might happen. So, the worst thing to do or say to a family that's going through cancer is to do or say nothing at all. A common thing I hear from parents is that there are people in their lives that they haven't heard from at all. They do nothing and they say nothing. This may be the most painful thing of all when it comes to friends and family is when people just don't do anything. So it's especially painful if it's someone you would have expected to be close to that inner circle to you and your child. Um, and their silence can leave you feeling confused and hurt and angry. There may be reasons why they don't reach out. They may feel like they don't know what to say or do. And sometimes when that happens, people err on the side of caution and fear of making a mistake or doing or saying the wrong thing. And so as a result, they just stay quiet. The more time that goes on with them being quiet, the more hesitant they become to reach out. They may believe that you want to be left alone and not bothered, that things are so overwhelming for you that they don't want to somehow bother you by reaching out. And so, in an effort not to bother you at such a difficult time and not wanting to intrude on your space, they just hold back from connecting altogether. They also might assume that if you wanted or needed help, that somehow you would know that and that you would reach out and ask, and so they're waiting to be asked. They might be going through something in their own life, or they may have previously gone through something that makes whatever it is that you're going through somehow difficult for them to be able to think about or manage their own feelings related to it. And so they feel like they don't have anything to offer you. They don't have something within them to give. So, and maybe hearing about your child being ill, that it makes them more anxious about their own kids or bring back memories that they are finding difficult to deal with. So they may underestimate their connection with you. They may assume that you already have enough of everything. You have enough support. I'm just a friend, but they have so many other friends and family that I'll just be in the way. Um, and the real truth of it is that it's so hard to know why they don't reach out, really, because it's really hard to interpret silence. But you well know that their silence causes you pain. So if we move beyond the people who don't do or say anything, what about everybody else? So we're going to talk in a few minutes about what people do and say that are helpful and supportive. But first, we're going to take a sec and talk about first the actions, the gestures, the conversations that are generally not seen as helpful. So we're going to try to look at when people reassure, when they offer advice, when they try to relate to what you're going through, when they're trying to find meaning or justify what's happening to you and your experience, when they display things like pity, and even when they step back and view you with this admiration. So let's look first at reassurance. So see if this sounds familiar. Don't worry, they're going to be fine. I know they're going to be okay. You just have to stay positive. So the problem is, in my opinion, that you would love to not worry, that you would love for your child to be fine after all of this. But it is, in fact, reasonable and understandable that you're worried, and you know that neither you nor your friends and family have a crystal ball. So requests from friends and family for you to stay positive and for you to only imagine the best case scenarios can leave you feeling bad and feeling guilty that you're not always positive. And it also kind of makes you think that maybe you shouldn't voice your worries or your fears or your concerns. Advice. So I would be very surprised if there are people attending tonight who can't relate to this one. So it often sounds something like the following examples. I read this article talking about a miracle cure in Germany. I know your daughter can't have surgery, but I read about this doctor in California who's doing cutting edge surgery. My friend's cousin did this treatment with a naturopath and their cancer was cured. Have you thought about going gluten-free, vegan, paleo? Did you know that sugar causes cancer and you can't let them eat candy ever again? Again, keeping in mind that people often want to help, but the ways that they offer to help is advice giving that's not solicited by you. So since your child has been diagnosed, you may have been racked with, lots of different worries about, am I doing enough? Is what we're doing actually going to make a difference and help my child? And it feels most often quite overwhelming when people who are not part of your healthcare team offer advice to you. I do realize that there are some times where people are researching on your behalf and maybe you've asked them to, but this is different than this. This is when people are reaching out, not at your request. So I've had parents tell me that when this happens, it makes them feel bad, almost as if they're not doing enough or if they haven't overturned every stone to make sure that their child gets better. So the idea of relating looks at the idea that in an effort to have you believe that they understand, sometimes what people do is they try to find something in their own lived experience that relates to the feelings that you're having. So if your child has cancer and maybe you're feeling worried that they're not going to get better, and let's say you convey that fear to your family friend, and in an effort to reassure you, what they say is something like, when my child got sick with COVID, I thought that they weren't going to be okay either, but they got better. Or you tell a relative that since your child has gotten cancer, that it's been incredibly challenging to keep up with day-to-day life for you at home. And then they say something like, oh, I understand how you feel. I just got a new job and my child just started hockey. And that means that they're running around a whole lot more as a parent. Or maybe someone talks, once they find out that your child has cancer, that person talks about their grandparent who had cancer and tries to relate it to your child having cancer. And again, I think that the intention is to support, but what parents tell me is it can make them feel like people are sort of minimizing what it is that they're actually going through. So justifying or finding meaning. So upon learning about your child's cancer diagnosis, they say something like, we only get what the universe thinks we can handle. Or maybe your child's cancer is happening to teach you, and you can insert whatever life lesson you want here. um, or the idea that God has a plan or everything happens for a reason. People try to say something in an effort to be reassuring. And again, there's that reassurance word that you notice is popping up again and again, the desire to reassure. But again, this attempt might make you feel actually quite angry or hurt, because the reality is having a child with cancer might very well feel like it is, in fact, much more than you can handle. You may feel like there are way easier ways to learn a lesson than having your child get cancer. And sometimes people tell me that it makes them sort of struggle with their own beliefs related to their faith, or it can feel confusing about how or why a child would be allowed to suffer. So hearing these platitudes can make you feel a bit like pulling away instead of engaging more. Pity. So I hear this not just from pediatric oncology families, but I also hear it from adults with cancer. And so the idea is that people give you the look. So it's sort of this thing where your head is slightly tilted and the lips are pursed, and it's a painful expression, often accompanied by something like, "How are you?" I think I can admit that I think I know what this expression looks like on my own face. It almost feels like an automatic response that people have upon hearing that someone's going through something really difficult. And it's like a nonverbal way of communicating concern and the idea that I'm really sorry to hear what you're going through. But it's done in such a way that it can feel like on the receiving end that you're being pitied, that you and your family are being pitied. And most parents I meet with really just want to be seen as the same person that they were before, but having people understand that what they're going through is tremendously painful and difficult, and that they're feeling really challenged, and that they desire not, in fact, to be pitied, but to be understood. So admiration, this feels like always a tricky one, because people say it so often, these comments that I'm going to mention now, but it feels a bit funny to be on the receiving end of it. So they're well-meaning comments, and they sound often something like, "You're so strong. I could never do what you're doing. You're so brave. I would be a mess if this were happening to me." And my understanding talking with parents is the problem is that you likely don't feel strong or brave most of the time. That no one asked you if you wanted to go through this, you just have to do it. You have to sit by your child's side while they have their port flushed, or you have to sit with your child when they're crying because they don't want to go to the hospital again, or get blood work again, or have a painful procedure done again. There really isn't a door number two that you can walk through. The only door that you have to keep walking through is the one that's bearing witness to your child's struggle, and just that you have to keep moving one foot in front of the other. And bravery and strength never seem to be the words that parents use to describe themselves. So there are other challenges as well. We often say at times of crisis to the person, "What can I do to help?" Or "Let me know what I can do to help." Although the offer may feel authentic, it asks you to ponder what you need at a time that it's hard to think straight. You may not know what you need. If you do know what you need, and what you need is for somebody to come and clean your bathrooms, it can feel really awkward to try to say that to somebody, especially if this is somebody who's really not close to your intimate circle. So the idea of sort of saying to somebody that you know through your child's school, "Yeah, sure, come on over and clean my bathroom." Um, Often really awkward. So we often fear that if we were to ask for what we need, that the person may be offering to do something but may not mean it, or that what you may be asking them may not be prepared, what they're prepared to be able to do. So often these kinds of vague offers go unexplored, and I hear a lot of parents saying things back like, "Oh, keep us in your thoughts and your prayers," and not really, specifying in any way real tangible things that people can do to support them. A further challenge is that a person may reach out when they hear what's going on for you and they offer their assistance, but then it's kind of like a one-time deal. They don't offer it ever again. So it's almost like if you didn't take them up, the week after your child was diagnosed, they don't reach out again. So, and when your child's in the early days after diagnosis, your needs may be very different than months later or a year or two into this experience. So most parents speak about having a very difficult time in knowing what they need, and then in particular, at a time of diagnosis or right after the child's been diagnosed. Loaded questions. So it was pointed out to me recently by one mom that even what sounds like a simple question, like "How are you?" or "How's your child doing?" if somebody texts that to you, um, it actually feels really loaded. So the idea is like, how do you put into words what you're feeling, what you're witnessing, what you're thinking, what happened in your day? All of the stuff that you're feeling and witnessing and thinking, it may be hard to articulate it and even to like face it yourself. So what happens is when somebody asks you those questions, sometimes you might respond really simply with kind of a catchphrase like, oh, hanging in there, or one day at a time, because what else can I say? Because if I actually said what I'm thinking and feeling and witnessing, it would be pages and pages, and I don't even know where to start. People sometimes have an expectation of a response. So an example I could give you is, let's say you receive a text from your aunt and the aunt is asking you, how are you doing, right, in a text. And you're waiting for the oncologist to give you a call regarding your child's scan that they had from a couple of days ago. And she texts you again half an hour later because you haven't responded saying hello, question mark. You then get a follow-up text half an hour later from your mom that says, hey, did you see that text from your aunt? So really, rather than feeling supported, you may feel pressured. And again, how do I summarize all of this into a soundbite for my aunt, right? Really hard to do. Another difficult time is when something's actually happening, like a medical crisis, or you're waiting again to meet with a doctor and you just got scans back. And so what happens is lots of people in your circle might actually know that this is happening. So you receive a whole bunch of messages that say, what happened? What did they say? From a whole lot of people at a time that you're feeling really overwhelmed and is super stressful for you. Expectations of appreciation. So again, I think people are often very, very kind at times like this. And so they do things or say things or they give you something that they know that you requested or that they thought you might need, even if it wasn't requested. So you receive the meal or you receive the gift card or whatever it was that they did for you. But then you get something that says, did you like it or did you get it? And so even though the gesture is really very much appreciated, the calling or the texting to all the people who are doing kind things can make it feel like more work than you have time for. The final one is underestimating or overestimating the connection. So underestimating the connection speaks to the issue that we talked about a few minutes ago. So that's when the very close friend or the very close family member that you would have expected based on how close they were with you before, when the way that they're reaching out to you is infrequent or vague, and really it's them not stepping up. So they're underestimating the connection. Overestimating is when it feels like people are kind of pushing those boundaries of your relationships with them in a way that feels awkward for you. So it might be like the friend of a friend showing up with coffee on your doorstep at 9 o'clock in the morning and asking to come in and talk to you about how you're doing. Again, it may be a kind gesture, but not what you need and definitely not at the time that you need it. So with all of these issues we discussed, it's really easy to see how things can go a bit awry as people try to support you. So how do we begin then to examine the ways that we can improve communication and help people understand what you need? Um, so this slide kind of looks familiar from earlier in the presentation. So let's go back to our circles again. So remember, we looked at who was closest to you. So who's part of your community? Who may be distanced from the day-to-day details and experience? Who's most intimately involved? So you're really looking at who are your people. Susan Silk is a psychologist who was diagnosed with cancer herself a few years back. And through her experience, she proposed a theory about how people interact with people in crisis. So again, think about you and your child with cancer. Your child gets to complain to you. They get to talk with you about their fears. They get to cry, whatever they need, right? You, in turn, might turn toward your mom to talk about what you went through today, what you witnessed in the hospital, what it was like to witness your child struggle. And when you reached out to her and share with her your thoughts, your feelings, your experiences, it might feel good to unload what you are thinking and feeling. But let's imagine for a moment that your mom then turns to you to talk about her worries about your child, or begins to cry or complain about why this is happening to her family. You may suddenly feel, instead of feeling comforted and supported, you might suddenly feel irritated or even angry. You might have thoughts like, why is she making this about her? Why can't she just be there for me? And truthfully, your mom's thoughts and feelings are understandable. She has a right to them. And she also has a right to have them heard and validated. So really, what's the problem here? And if you look to ring theory, it would say that the way in which your mom is expressing herself is sort of out of order. The idea is whoever is in the center of the crisis can complain and talk about their worries, concerns, anything else they want with anyone else in the outer circles. The next closer person to that center circle can talk to anyone else, just not to the person in the smaller circle, and so on and so on. So the people in the outer circles to people in the inner circles, really we're looking for them only to provide comfort and support. It's not that people can't talk about how they think and feel, they just have to do it with someone in one of the outer circles. So in the example we talked about, an improvement would be that your child vents to you, you vent to your mom vents to her brother, he vents to his partner, and so on and so on. So when in doubt, you can kind of remember that idea that comfort and support in, and questioning, worrying, complaining out. So comfort in, dump out. So then let's apply that to help us understand how to create a more supportive community for you. So you could begin by sitting down and drawing your circles. So again, put yourself and your child, your partner, your other children if you have them. Place those in that inner circle or as close to the inner circle as you feel it's appropriate. Then you start placing the people in your life in the circles, starting with the very closest and working your way out. Um, I think it can be really helpful when you do this, when you kind of look at each individual relationship and figure out what's working and asking yourself how you can encourage it to continue. So an example would be, that neighbor that you kind of put on the outside circle, but when they found out that this is what your family's going through, they started cutting your lawn for you. So perhaps a quick text to them to say, much appreciated. Would you mind continuing it for the next little while because we're still back and forth to the hospital so much? You could also ask yourself if something isn't really working, what the reason might be, and what, if anything, you actually want to do about it. I was told by a family one time that someone would drop a lasagna off for them once a week, and it was homemade and very thoughtful and really actually a very tasty dish. The problem was the lasagna came with peas loaded into it, and their child loathed peas. So when they asked themselves whether it was worth the effort and energy to call the person to request no peas, please, they decided it kind of wasn't worth it, and they picked out the peas one by one because it was delicious enough to make it worth the effort. But they were able to kind of ask themselves that question, like, yeah, maybe the whole thing is great and this one little aspect isn't working, so I think it's okay to leave it. So that's a kind of lighthearted example where someone might decide not to do something about it. But there are other situations that are not so light at all. And the scenario that I just described a minute ago about the mom, the grandmother, complaining to her daughter about what's going on, rather than the other way around, really meant that this daughter, who is the parent of the child with cancer, really needed to have a difficult and tearful conversation with her mom about what it felt like for her when her mom wasn't able to kind of keep her own thoughts and feelings about it to herself and share them with someone else instead of her. And so if she hadn't done that, though, she would have found herself maybe hesitating to talk to her mom, and she really, really needed her mom. So that's an example where they said it's worth it to do something about it. Designate. So how many texts or emails or calls do you get in a day? Asking for the details of scans, how you or your child is doing, if there's anything you need. So one father told me that he felt like he needed a personal assistant to handle all the correspondence. So designating somebody to be your point person can really help on a bunch of different fronts. So the person can filter questions, comments, suggestions. They can only bring you what you want to hear or deal with. They can also help with that big question about how we communicate and share information. They can ask people for what you need. So it's way easier for that point person to be able to say, hey, once a week, how about if we find somebody who can clean the bathrooms at so-and-so's house? And suddenly people sign up to come over and clean your bathroom. So it's sometimes easier to have somebody else ask for what you need. So a Wellspring created by you or with your point person can give updates, list chores, suggestions about how to help or where to sign up for a meal train or giving rides to and from the hospital, walking the dog. You kind of get the point. It's really just you tell your point person what you need and they can tell your people what you need. So when you're a friend or family member wanting to help, there are three things that I think are important to keep in mind. So the first one is really how important it is to stay in touch and stay connected and not fade out. Further, the importance to offer help in a specific way and deliver that help, and to do it all from a place that offers support and love and compassion, along with comfort. So the time around the diagnosis is important, but many families talk about being inundated with support at the beginning and then seeing the support trickle out as the weeks, the months, and the years march on. And this is especially true when a child dies. Reaching out doesn't have to be complicated. Um, a text that says, I'm thinking about you, um, a text that a text that lets people know that you're there. The idea is to have no expectations, right? So someone I worked with told me that they had a friend who just sent them a message once a week on an ongoing basis, just to say, I'm thinking of you and here if you need me. Sometimes that friend was taken up on the offer. Sometimes they just got a heart emoji back, and sometimes they got no reply at all, but it didn't seem to matter that the messages just kept coming regardless. And the person going through the crisis felt really, really supported by them. So offering support in a specific way and delivering that support is very important. Families are all different and what they need actually can look different as well. So it really helps to have that point person or a website or a WhatsApp group that helps organize this. So um, I've just listed some things here that I've heard from families that they found really helpful over the course of their experience. So some of the suggestions are practical, like looking after your pets, for example, like dog walking or taking the dog to their house or coming over and feeding your cat. Some are emotionally supportive, like offering to distract you by taking you out for a meal or coming over and having a coffee with you and just sort of keeping company. Other support might be financial, like doing a fundraiser or donating gift cards for gas or restaurants or groceries, whatever it is that your family needs. The important thing is having what people do and what you need line up in a way that's meaningful and helpful for you. So all of the things that family and friends do should come from a place of support, love, compassion, and comfort. This is done when they reach out without expecting anything back from you, when they acknowledge what you're going through and not ignore it or not try to just cheer you up. When they ask themselves before speaking, is what I'm going to say to you going to be a comfort to you? And if not, perhaps hold back and don't say it. When in doubt, maybe say, I don't know what to say, right? Sometimes we try to fill in those blanks. It helps if they avoid giving advice or opinions unless you specifically ask for it. The main idea is to make your life more simple, not more complicated. And it's important that they reach out in a way that keeps your needs in mind, not their own. So sometimes having a few phrases or statements in your back pocket that you can pull out available to respond when the support that's offered by others isn't what you need at that time. So imagine that you're waiting for scan results and someone is sharing their own fears or sadness with you, and it feels hard. You can say so just simply by saying that it's hard for me to hear that right now. You might even suggest that they speak to another person in one of your outer circles or reach out to Wellspring for support. Um, if someone wants to talk, but you don't want to, or you can't, or you don't feel like you have the energy, saying so and letting them know at the same time that you appreciate the offer. When advice is offered, sometimes it helps to have a go-to statement like this one that kind of lets them know that you're not entertaining other suggestions. Again, people frequently reach out offering to help, but you may not be able to respond to everyone and articulate what you need. Um, but you could cut and paste a response so that it's easier and you can just sort of say, hey, this is where you can find out how to help. So finally, even after all of this, you may be wondering how to handle your relationship with a particular person. Perhaps it's because of how close they are to you, or because they seem to have trouble receiving feedback, whatever it is, or just simply that it's a very complicated, complex situation. So you don't have to figure it out alone. So reach out for help. So within your groups through OPAC, talking to other families that you meet at the hospital, you could reach out to your hospital social worker, and of course, please reach out to Wellspring. I'm going to take a couple minutes just to talk about the supports at Wellspring and then open up the session to the group for questions, answers, and discussion. So in this segment, I'm just going to speak for a few minutes just about the services through Wellspring, what Wellspring is about, and how those services can meet your needs. So Wellspring Cancer Support offers supportive services to cancer patients of any stage, any type of cancer, and those services are offered to family and to caregivers as well as to patients themselves. The programs are professionally run. We have volunteers who support the programs that have had cancer in their families or have had cancer themselves. The programs themselves are offered at no cost to you whatsoever. Um, the centers and the well on the web, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute, do not rely on government or hospital funding, but rather just on donations. So prior to COVID taking over and having everyone go online, Wellspring launched in the fall of 2019 Wellspring Center for Virtual Cancer Support. And what was great about it is that Wellspring, instead of being able to provide services to people where there was a physical location of a Wellspring Center, they were able then instead to offer services to a national audience in all provinces and territories across Canada. And they were able to do collaborative programming with other Wellspring locations as well. And it was interesting to see how quickly they got up and running, and 94% of the programs that had been previously offered have now been adapted and have been offered virtually. So through the Well on the Web programming, there are group programs that are interactive, that are live, where people can engage with other people through video conferencing. There are webinars that are live presentations that are being offered by professionals. There's individual support that can be offered by phone or virtually on a virtual platform. We have also things like self-paced webinars, or audio resources, and those are things that you can do at your own pace and at your own time. So you can access them any time of the day or night. And there are also things that are downloadable resources that you can access as well. So of particular interest to this group may be some of the family programming. So when a child is diagnosed with cancer, we have a downloadable resource through the Wellspring website that's entitled When a Child Has Cancer, that hopefully answers some questions and talks about some of the major issues that are faced by a family when a child is diagnosed with cancer. You are able to receive some short-term counseling. That could be for you as a parent, it could be for you with your partner, it could be for your children or for the siblings of the child who has cancer. So all of that again is offered free of charge on a short-term basis. And there are also some wonderful family events that are often advertised, like parties and times where people can come together for some very specialized program for children. So if you look at the Wellspring website, you'll see that there are quite a few programs that are offered that are available to caregivers. So things like the Healing Journey, which is a multi-level course that you can take, and it really looks at reducing stress, finding new tools for coping. It incorporates some meditation practices, things like that. In addition, there are programs like yoga, meditation. So have a look at the roster of programming that's available to you. If you have questions about whether or not it suits your needs, maybe give a call or reach out to Wellspring by email, and there would be somebody at the other end who could give you a hand to make sure that it's meeting your needs. Further to this, what I wanted to leave you with tonight is a short clip that I think really speaks to this idea of going through a painful experience. So this is a clip aimed at people who are grieving, but I think it's really relevant for anybody who's a parent dealing with childhood cancer. And it really speaks to, as you go through a painful experience, what do you need from the people around you? And I think it really does a great job of encapsulating many of the major things that we talked about tonight. And they do it in a couple of minutes, which I think is wonderful. So you can, if you find it to be a helpful clip, this is something you can use for your own reference, but you could also share it with other people to let them know this is what I need. And so I hope it's a helpful clip for you. And let's give a listen.
So what do we do about all the pain we see in the world? All the pain we feel in our own lives? And why does it seem like our best efforts to help somebody feel better always backfire? I've been studying intense grief and loss, baby death, violent crimes, accidents, suicides, and natural disasters. And I've learned something really interesting. Cheering people up, telling them to be strong and persevere, helping them move on, it doesn't actually work. It's kind of a puzzle. It seems counterintuitive, but the way to help someone feel better is to let them be in pain. This is true for those giant losses and the ordinary, everyday ones. Educator Parker Palmer writes, "The human soul doesn't want to be advised or fixed or saved. It simply wants to be witnessed, exactly as it is." He's talking about acknowledgement here. Acknowledgement is this really amazing multi-tool. It makes things better even when they can't be made right. For example, somebody's struggling. Their baby died, or there's been a bad accident, or their mom got sick, and they're just sad. It's way more helpful to join them in their pain than it is to cheer them up. But here's what we tend to do instead. "You have 2 other children, you need to find joy in them." Or, "You know what you need? You just need to go out dancing and shake it off." Or, "I felt really sad once. Did you try acupuncture?" We're not really sure what to do with someone's pain, so we do what we've been taught. We look on the bright side. We try to make people feel better. We give them advice. It's not like this is nefarious. I mean, we try to cheer people up because we think that's our job. We're not supposed to let people stay sad. The problem is, you can't heal somebody's pain by trying to take it away from them. Now, acknowledgement does something different. When a giant hole opens up in someone's life, it's actually much more supportive to acknowledge that hole and let pain exist. It's actually a radical act to let things hurt. It goes against what we've been taught. In order to really support you, I have to acknowledge that things really are as bad as they feel to you. If I try to cheer you up, you end up defending yourself and your feelings. If I give you advice, you feel misunderstood instead of supported. And I don't get what I want either because I wanted you to feel better. It's pretty rare that you could actually talk somebody out of their pain. Rarely does the admonishment to look on the bright side actually heal things for someone. It just makes them stop telling you about their pain. It's so tempting to try to make things better. When somebody shares something painful, it's much more helpful to say, "I'm sorry that's happening. Do you want to tell me about it?" To be able to say, "This hurts," without being talked out of it, that's what helps. Being heard helps. It seems too simple to be of use, but acknowledgement can be the best medicine we have. It makes things better, even when they can't be made right.
So as mentioned, here's a list of references and resources available to you, including a link to that clip that we just saw. And there's a number of websites that friends and family may find helpful as references. Finally, thank you very much for coming out tonight, and let's close the this part of the presentation, and we'll go now to questions, comments, and hopefully have a bit of a discussion.
Thank you so much, Laura, for this excellent presentation. It touched upon so many important topics to our families. And it touched everything that I was hoping it would cover, like what not to say, what to say, and how things change with relationships. And I just wanted to ask if anybody has any questions for Laura, any tips, or if and all of this is so relatable. I'm sure everybody here can relate to some of these things that they've heard from well-meaning friends and family. You want to share any tips or any stories or any advice? Feel free to chime in or put it in the chat. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks, Sarai.
Thank you.
Such an important topic, right?
It absolutely is, and we hear that all the time. I'm sure parent liaisons hear from families too, how things change. with their friends and family after a child's diagnosed. And I'm glad you also included bereaved families, because that's really important as well. They often feel left out, after, like you said, after a while, after the loss or after the diagnosis, and then things just kind of trickle away. But yeah, it's important to acknowledge that. I guess I don't see any questions. Feel free anytime. Don't be shy. And you mentioned Wellspring, of course, has a lot of information here. And I think Susie put in something. Please visit Wellspring's website for more information. So it's wellspring.ca. And there you can go on, check all their programs. And they have the parents of the new parents of PED support group for parents. Susie, did you want to talk about that, or Laura?
Yeah, sure. I can speak to that. What we're hoping to do is we're going to have we're going to start off with a one-time meeting date. And the idea is to kind of bring parents together and to connect, really to talk about what the needs are for people to have to have a support. And so ideally it might turn into something if we have enough interest. So I think we have a date. Do you know? Oh, there it is. Perfect. Susie's right on that. So let me just see here. Do you mind just to read out from the chat there, Sarai? Can you see it there?
Ryla was, or do you mean the question or the time and date?
Maybe just the time and the date first, and then we can go to a
Sure.
question if it came up.
So Thursday, February 16th, 1 to 2:30 p.m. Eastern on Zoom.
Yeah, so really anybody who's interested in attending that can log in to register. So if you're not already a member at Wellspring, you can go become a member of Wellspring for no charge. And then you can click on that link that will take you right there. And it's going to start out with a one-time visit where we all kind of come together. And it's really a chance to talk about what are the supports that are needed and how could Wellspring play a role in supporting you. And then that might turn into a more regular connection where we can pull parents together really from across Canada if people are interested to offer some support to each other and kind of learn from each other's experiences. So was there a question as well?
So Ryla has a question. Where do we find those links you showed that we can perhaps send to our friends and family for their reference? Now, I know we are recording this, Ryla, so I'm going to put it up on OPAC's social media accounts and YouTube by the end of the week, so you can reference the presentation again and see those links. But I don't know, Laura, if you have any more time.
Sure. So I would say that the actual YouTube video, you can just look it up on YouTube. And so it's Megan Devine, or I think it's Divine. And it's the title, I think I had it listed there, but it's really easy to access. So you could take that and share it with anybody that you would like. And then, as Sarai said, once it's actually posted from OPAC, the actual presentation, you should be able to kind of pause on the presentation and look at all those different web pages. And really a lot of the web pages kind of say the same thing, because as you notice, I hope that some of the slides spoke to your own experience. So a lot of what I shared is really, there are things that I've learned from the families that I've worked with over the years. But if you look at those websites, it sounds like a common experience no matter where the web page is from. So if it's from California, they said the same thing as I'm saying, basically, is here are the things that sort of are helpful, and here are the things that are kind of not helpful. So you should be able to access them without any difficulty once they get sent out.
Great, thank you. Hopefully that answers your question, Ryla. Susie also put more pre-recorded webinars to help with cancer-related stress, and she put some links on the chat if you're interested in clicking on those.
Yeah.
Of course, make sure to check wellspring.ca. It's a great website. I know we linked to it on our website for counseling and all these programs. You have so many great programs of everything that could be needed, not just the support groups, but like nutrition and everything. So
yeah, there's stuff like, I think the nice thing is when you actually log in, you can look at the big long roster and you're kind of like, oh my gosh, my kid doesn't eat enough vegetables, like for most of us, right? It's an ongoing challenge. So they might have a dietitian who's talking about how to have more legumes, or, there's tons of different topics. You name it, it seems to be up there. So So yeah, and obviously, to reach out, and Susie's letting you know that you can email directly to Susie as well.
Yeah, if you have any questions, Susie can answer them about Wellspring and their great programs. And of course, OPAC also has our drop-in virtually on Tuesdays, 7:30 p.m. with our parent liaisons, Susan, Michelle, and Karen. And it's like this, a virtual chat where you just talk to other parents, talk to our parent liaisons. They're all parents of that have had children with cancer, so they understand firsthand your experiences, and just that peer support that's so important, especially if you're feeling alone and maybe your friends and family don't understand your experience, but we have a lot of people here who do. And our parent liaisons are also at Sick Kids in person on Mondays and Fridays, 10:30 to 12:30 in room 8102 at Clinic. So please be sure to stop by there if you're at Sick Kids. Any questions, any final comments? Thank you, Laura, that Michelle says, and Susan for this terrific presentation. Just
My
seeing if
pleasure. It's so nice to be here, and as I said, it's such an important topic, and I really I think the more we can help people know how they can help, and again, tricky to do it, but hopefully we maybe just get the conversation started.
Absolutely. And Jackie, she comments, thank you for all of that. Everything you said resonated with me, as true to my experiences, feeling acknowledged, which is so important. Thank you, Jackie. I'm glad
Thanks, Jackie.
you found it helpful. Okay, so I'm going to end now. Again, this will be up on our website. I'll put it on our socials and everything by the end of the week, so you can revisit this presentation and see all the great resources and share it with your friends and family, hopefully. So thank you again, Laura and Susie as well from Wellspring, for being here tonight. And have a good night, everyone. Stay safe from all that snow.
Our pleasure. Take care.
Have a good night. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.